Hi everyone, and welcome to another comparison video here on the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. Today we're comparing Roland's FP-10 with Casio's CDP-S350. These are the two big titans, or certainly two of the biggest titans in the budget full 88-note digital piano category, and it's the first time that we've ever matched them up. This has been done by request. We had quite a few people asking for our opinion between these two instruments, and so here we are today to deliver our observations. If it's the first time to the channel, we would really appreciate if you did hit that subscribe and notification, especially if you like what you see, because we're always coming out with new material and we'd love to see you back for more as a regular viewer. So without further ado, let's get started comparing the FP-10 with the CDP-S350. Let's rewind about 5 years, maybe 6 years, and one of the most dominant, most compelling arguments in the budget category was a Casio PX160. This was an instrument that really pioneered or nudged a lot of the major manufacturers into developing new lower priced products, which delivered well above what people's expectations used to be of that price point. The PX160 had a triple sensor. It had a really respectable action. It had quite a sophisticated tone engine for its size. You could get it with the triple pedal, you could get it in the stand. It was a killer bundle. It wasn't a perfect instrument by any means, but it really did kind of set the tone, and I think was one of the major nudges for Roland developing the FP-10. And so we've got the Roland FP-10 on our left, and what you really could think of as the successor or the replacement to the PX160, which is the CDP-S350. It occupies a very, very similar price point, a little more expensive, but of course things always get more expensive over time. So we've got these two instruments to compare. Not exactly the same beast, but so close in price that if you are looking at one, there's a good chance you're looking at the other. And so the point of this video is to try and point those differences out to you so you can figure out what might be the best fit at home. We are going to start with sound, as we always do. The FP-10 delivers a pair of 6-watt speakers, and it is coming to you through basically a throttled down version of their Supernatural chip. They've got 96 polyphony on this, which feels a little bit low if you're comparing it to the rest of the FP series, particularly now that we've got FP30X, 60X, and 90X on their way out. But they've done this in order to maintain the complexity of the tone. I mean, it's very easy to get a tone engine up to, a polyphony of 128 or even a polyphony of 192 if you are going to really strip back the tonal complexity that you're demanding of the chip. If you keep it really high, but you're also trying to keep your cost down, you wind up kind of with what Roland's done here, which is striking that balance between keeping a decent amount of complexity in the tone, but limiting the amount of polyphony so that you can keep your chipset affordable for the price range. We are miking these instruments today so you can actually hear the onboard speakers rather than just the line out. It's super easy for a digital piano to sound nice and clean when we're taking a line out, and we have done other videos where you can hear the FP-10 or the CDP-S350 with line out sound, but for this we are taking stereo mics out so you can hear at home basically what I'm hearing right here. No affecting, no EQ, no nothing. So let's listen to the FP-10 first, and then we'll move on to the CDP-S350. And let's listen to the CDP-S350. We're going to have it also on its default tone, which will be its grand piano. Fairly different sounds coming out of those two instruments. When we get over to the specs on the CDP-S350, these are a pair of 8-watt speakers versus the pair of 6-watt speakers. I have to say it's not really that detectable that you're getting more tone out of the Casio than on the Roland. In fact, somehow Roland manages to be getting a little more warmth out of those smaller speakers. The other big difference is the polyphony. On the Casio, we're down to 64. The chipset in here is very, very similar to what you're going to find on the PXS3000. In fact, when you hook up the Cordana app between this one and the PXS3000, it's virtually identical. So even though the displays are different, even though the user interface is a little bit different, it's delivering almost the exact same feature set between these two instruments. The big difference, of course, is just the capacity. I guess this would be like the cache capacity, or I'm not a computer engineer, so somebody out there can probably explain exactly what aspect of the chipset or the motherboard needs to be expanded to accommodate more polyphony, but certainly that is the main difference, because on the PXS3000 we've got a polyphony of 192 versus 64. And when you get down into 64 range, this is something that's actually quite noticeable without taxing the instrument too much. I start to notice it even when you've got, say, a double layer on this instrument, or you've got the auto accompaniment going and you're starting to play some pretty thick chords. If you're really a fairly fluent, fairly advanced player, you know when you've played a chord in perfect simultaneous fashion versus when you're not. And you do start to hear a little bit of rolling in that chord as that chip is struggling a little bit with that maximum polyphony. So there is a bit of a difference between the polyphony there. However, there are a number of things that tip in the Casio's favor, not necessarily the Roland's favor, once we start getting a little further deeper into the feature set beyond just wattage and polyphony. The first one would be the sheer number of options that you have to select from when it comes to tones. On the Roland, we have a little more than a dozen. Now, the quality of those sounds is certainly good. So it's not as though Roland hasn't given you some nice playing options to choose from. 4 acoustic pianos, you've already heard the one. Here's piano 2. I think they might call that ballad piano. And 3. And 4. Which is obviously a bright. And then 2 E pianos. And then we've got E piano 2, kind of a DX sound, the harpsichord. And the vibraphone, organ. And some strings, pad, and jazz scat. All the standards, all the hits. But through most of those, if not all of those, it's a nice, lush, complex tone. Lots of different artifacts in the sound that you're hearing. Very expressive. Over on the Casio, we go from a few, just over a dozen to hundreds. I mean, it's not even close. So when it comes to navigating those huge selections of tone on the CDP-S350, you're definitely able to do that with the onboard user interface. I really like using the Cordana app because it's really well laid out and it's so easy to connect. You do need a cable. And it's not the kind of USB cable that you typically have lying around, so you do have to hop on an Amazon or a site like that and spend $5-10 to get yourself the right type of USB connection. But once you do that, the Cordana app is extremely easy to use, and I'm just going to hop into the piano remote controller and give you an idea of the huge number of sounds that you have to choose from here. So here's the stage piano. And that's what we were hearing at the beginning. And then we get into grand piano. And mellow piano, bright piano, ambient piano, tons and tons and tons and tons. Very well done in terms of the app. You also have the ability to make changes and edits to the pedal settings, so you can set up the pedals for different triggers and assign them to different effects if you want to. You've got the metronome on here, and then you've also got the auto accompaniment, which is, again, something that you don't really have on the FP-10. So in terms of sound, what we're talking about is two instruments that have approached this in a very, very different way. Almost, even though you would think that this is the same audience, if it is the same audience that they're fighting for, they're going at this audience with two very different arguments. With Roland, you are going at them with the argument that piano tone and the highest quality piano tone you can possibly deliver for this price, matched up with probably, you could argue, the most advanced piano action in the price range as well. And we're going to strip everything else away and leave you with something that is pretty no frills, but delivering a good, solid musical experience. On the other hand, Casio has balanced this and said, okay, we're not going to give you the very, very best action. We're not going to give you the very, very best tone set, but they're definitely going to be decent, middle-of-the-road options. And on top of that, for the same price point, we are loading on the digital feature set. Tons of sounds to choose from, all of which are fairly high quality, and the auto accompaniment and some fairly advanced onboard recording functions as well. None of which really the FP-10 has. The other thing, and we were just talking about this, that I think Casio has done exceptionally well is the Cordana app is easy to use, it's very stable, it's very reliable, and to achieve that, this may be one of the reasons why they dispense with trying to get Bluetooth happening, which can be, at times, on other instruments, not quite as stable as one would like. So by going with a USB connection, you ensure that Android and Apple devices equally are able to sync with this with no problem, no lag issues, no weird protocol issues. So very, very different feature sets when it comes to the sound and how it presents to your ear. We're going to get some of those specs up on the screen for you in just a quick second, and we'll be back for a discussion of the action. So the FP-10 uses the PHA-4 action. This is the action that Roland has in a number of their instruments. They use it in their new F701. They use it in the RP701. They use it in their FP30X and FP60X. So it's an action which is in wide release. The action is a triple sensor. It also has escapement simulation on it. And it is a larger, slightly heavier action than what you find on similarly priced Casios or even Kawais or Yamahas. Like I said, it could be argued the PHA-4 is probably the most advanced action in this price point that's available on the market. Like any plastic action, the more complex you make it, mechanically, the louder it gets. And so there have been, over the course of the life of PHA-4 in the market, a few users who have found the mechanics of the key to be about loud for their liking. And I find this is especially noticeable if you have people that are using this with headphones. You may have a partner in the house or somebody else that's listening to you play with headphones. Notice just how loud mechanically the instrument is, which makes you become a little more aware of it. When you're playing it on your own, it really is not that particularly obvious that you're getting any kind of a mechanical sound. And of course, whatever you're hearing through the microphones today is what we're hearing here in terms of the sound of the mechanic of the key. But certainly a nice subtle texture on the white keys, nice subtle texture on the black keys, really beautifully weighted, and otherwise I'm a big fan of the action. Continue to be a big fan of that action. On the Casio, this is, oops, we'll get back to piano sound here. Now, I've heard directly from Casio, this is not the same action that is in the PXS 1000 and 3000. It's actually slightly different. And you'll notice that on the 1000 and 3000 that it's called a smart scaled, whereas on the 350 it's not. It's just called a scaled hammer action. They're very similar, but I don't think they're exactly the same. Which makes sense because they don't feel the same. Now, the 350 actually feels just slightly heavier than my impression of what I get on the PXS 1000 or 3000, which is not necessarily a good thing on its own. And there is a tiny bit of sponginess to this action that I don't actually get, say, playing the PXS 3000. So in some ways, it's a quieter action mechanically. And probably also not quite as fast as a reset. Also interesting, the repetition speed on the black notes on the CDP-S350 is better than what you get on the PXS 1000 or 3000, which is obviously a result of some of the different geometry. I was reading a couple of comments on a previous video we'd done, somebody asking actually about the difference between those actions, the 350 and the PXS 1000 and 3000. And I had made the comment that the PXS 1000, 3000 action felt a little bit lighter. And so while that's true, as I said, I don't think that necessarily means that this is the more advanced action. I definitely prefer playing the action on the 1000 or 3000 versus this. But it's not miles apart. Like I said, what I'm noticing is a bit of a difference. Is just a little spongier, and a sense that it's just a little heavier, just slightly more sluggish. Now, even though that's the playing impression that I'm getting, you have this odd thing where the black note is actually resetting a little bit faster on this than on the PXS 1000, 3000. That could be due to the fact that the actual counterweight on the 1000, 3000 is a little lighter on the black note, which is why it actually weighs out slightly less than the white key. So anyway, lots of minutia in there, but point being, not exactly the same, and definitely a bit of a different feel between this and the smart scaled action. Between these two, there's no doubt about it, if you're buying for action, if that's a top priority, I'm sorry, but the Roland takes the cake on that one. But certainly both more than acceptable and usable in a wide variety of situations. There is no triple sensor in the 350. Not sure that's a huge deal for the playing experience. For somebody who is going to be using this potentially for MIDI input, that might be a consideration, especially if you are doing some MIDI inputting for a digital piano performance where you might be using an acoustic piano VST, and this is the trigger. Triple sensors tend to be a very good thing. They just even out that MIDI output and tend to deliver a bit more of an authentic you know, touch curve and you know, the MIDI information going to your computer. Anyway, so that's it about Action. We're going to get some specs up there on that, and we will be back to talk about some of the non-musical features and differences between these two instruments in just a second. Thank you so much for being with us. See you in a minute. Okay, so back with our last section talking about some of the non-musical components of these two instruments and how they stack up. The FP-10 is available with a matching stand. It is appropriately called the KSC FP-10. But the FP-10 is not available in any sort of a triple pedal configuration. So the default pedal is a fairly basic plastic pedal, as is the CDP-S. I'd strongly suggest upgrading that if you're going the Roland direction to the DP-10. And you can get it with the matching stand, or you can just put it on an X stand or anything you like. The FP-10 is only available in black. There is no white option at this time. CDP-S also available with a matching stand, but it is available with a triple pedal, or of course the default pedal that it comes with, again, just one of those basic square plastic pedals. They both have the fundamental digital piano features that we all take for granted at this point, like metronome, transpose. You can split the keyboard into two, you can layer two sounds up. We obviously mentioned the fact that this one, on top of just the tone, has a few other extensive features, and I'm going to touch a little bit about that on that now. I would highly suggest that if you are going the route of the Casio, that you for sure engage the use of their Cordana app for virtually any of this stuff, because the interface, the user interface of the Cordana app is so easy. I really think that it increases the usability and the enjoyment of what you're going to get out of the CDP-350. So if we want to take a look at their accompaniment function, and we turn the accompaniment mode on, we'll talk about very briefly the arpeggiator and the auto harmonizer, but this is kind of what you're going to wind up getting. You can also, so that's, you know, tons of fun, lots of valuable hours of your life just gone to auto accompaniment land. But then there's also an arpeggiator which you can use with this, which is kind of fun. Or the auto harmonizer, which is also a lot of fun. So lots of easy ways to cue up the fills and cue up the variation back between the normal and the more elaborated rhythm that you might happen to be playing. And you can do all of that either on the display here, or you can use the Cordana app to do that. There's also some recording options on here that you've got both in terms of usable from the onboard interface as well as the Cordana app. Whereas if you want to do really any recording on the FP-10, that is going to have to be done exclusively through the app, and it sort of just sits there contained on the app. You'll have to get it out through some other way, really just there kind of for personal practice. So there you have it, two extremely different offerings for a very similar price. The Roland actually being the more expensive of the two by about $100. And so just to sum up what you're getting with the both, if the primary focus of your playing is going to be acoustic piano, if this is a practice instrument for you, if you are getting this as a first-time piano and your focus is really going to be just on learning kind of more acoustic oriented repertoire, and maybe you're working with the teacher on that, the FP-10 is going to be the direction you want to go. The action is probably the best that you can get for the price point. And even though the polyphony is scaled down considerably from what you get on the higher FPs, 96 is still enough to do the vast majority of normal piano playing. And they've done that so they didn't have to take away the complexity in that acoustic piano tone, which is certainly quite lovely on the Roland. If, on the other hand, you're somebody who isn't that hung up on sort of the more of a purist piano experience, and you're looking for just general musical fun, or maybe you are a piano player, but this is something that you want to be accompanying a vocalist with, maybe you play in a band, and all of those accompaniment functions and all of the extra tones are something that you're going to get a huge amount of use out of, well, is the action that much less than the Roland that you should consider it a huge compromise? Probably not. Is the piano sound going to be something that you really notice, especially if you are playing in a mix with a few other instruments, or there's other background noise factors going on? There's a good chance you'd never be able to tell the difference or notice or care about the difference in the complexity of the piano tone, to be honest. So two very different use cases, two very, very different values for the money, but two great instruments. So I hope you have found the comparison useful, hope you've enjoyed the video, and most of all, thank you so much for stopping by at the channel. My name is Stu Harrison. This is Merriam Pianos on YouTube. It's been our comparison of the FP-10 and the Casio CDP-S350, and we hope you will certainly stop by for more videos. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and have yourself a great day.